An unlikely coalition of armed groups and rebels on the offensive in Mali. Russian forces backing the military government are retreating from bases in the north. Soldiers are being investigated for colluding in the attacks. Is Mali's junta losing control? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Rishaad. Salamat. Mali declared independence from France in 1960. Since then, successive governments have faced a challenge to their authority in the north. Armed groups have carried out 4 uprisings, but the latest is the most consequential. Fighters linked to Al-Qaeda joined forces with Tuareg rebels, seizing control of several towns and tightening a siege on the capital. The military has been in power since a coup in 2020. It enlisted help from Russian forces to drive out armed groups operating in the Sahel. Now, the military government has accused former colonial power France of backing the attacks. Is the junta losing control? And will it seek regional support to stay in office? We'll pose these questions to our guests. But first, this report by Ferdi Akar.
Triumphant, Tuareg rebels raised their flag at a former army base in Tessalit, northern Mali. They joined forces with an Al-Qaeda-linked armed group late last month, launching an offensive against the military government and its Russian allies. The fighters have claimed a string of successes, seizing control of the northern Kidal region and laying siege to the capital Bamako, where fears are growing.
When you hear there's attacks elsewhere, it's only natural to be afraid. All you can do is pray to God to calm the situation. We go to bed with fear at our hearts. Even when you're inside, if one of your loved ones is outside, you're afraid.
The arrest of several junior officers and retired military personnel on charges of colluding with the rebels and armed groups has deepened the sense of insecurity.
I want to send a message to the public. Report anything suspicious to the authorities. What happened last Saturday was likely an inside job, so we need to stay vigilant.
The violence is the greatest challenge to the junta since it took power in successive coups in 2020 and 2021. Coup leaders accused the previous administration and former colonial power France of failing to tackle insecurity, especially in the north, the result of armed groups operating in the Sahel. In 2022, Mali's military government ordered French troops to leave the country and sought assistance from Russia's Wagner group of mercenaries. Burkina Faso and Niger followed suit after their militaries seized power. But since then, insecurity in Sahel countries has only worsened. In Mali, rights organizations accuse Russian forces, now renamed Africa Corps, of committing atrocities.
We have never had foreign soldiers massacre civilians the way they do. They were the French, the Americans, but we have never seen foreign soldiers kill children and women like the Russians.
While the military government has accused Tuareg rebels and Al-Qaeda-linked armed groups of killing civilians. All parties have denied wrongdoing. The fighters say they will push on to more cities, including the historic Timbuktu. They've urged people to unite against the junta. Russian forces say they have helped prevent several major attacks in recent days. But after its withdrawal from Kidal and other outposts, Mali's military appears to be on the defensive, and its position looks increasingly fragile. Ferdi Akar, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Dakar is Oluwole Ojewale, the Regional Coordinator for West and Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies. Kabir Adamu is in Abuja. He's the Managing Director of Beacon Security and Intelligence, a security risk management agency operating in Nigeria as well as the Sahel region. And in Cairo is Ulf Leising, Director of the Sahel Program at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, a German think tank. A warm welcome to you all. Let's start off with you, Oluwole. The thing is, how did we get to this state of affairs in Mali? And we have to go back quite a long way, don't we?
Thank you so much for having me. I think it has been a very long journey in terms of actions and inactions that has brought Mali and the entire Central Sahel state to where we are now. And I think it's also a disaster foretold, particularly when you look at the trajectory of what has been happening, at least from 2012. A combination of some factors that are within the jurisdiction of Mali and things that are also externally precipitated, like the fall of Gaddafi and how foreign fighters, people who have gone to Libya, return to Mali. And then we have the convoluted crisis of military intervention in politics in the country, even though they pledged that they were going to roll back the mayhem of insecurity in the country. But I think the jury is out for the people to see that in the last 5 years, they failed in all aspects of securitization, particularly in protecting lives and property, which is the central objective of government. The last factor that I think I need to also mention is the fact that in the midst of this crisis, then rather than looking at the multilateral security provision, security cooperation, they narrowed down by demonizing the Western security support and took sides by taking a solo journey to Russia. And I think anybody who is looking at what is happening in the global scene now, particularly since the 4 years of Russia invasion of Ukraine, it has clearly shown that there is very limited resource and support that Russia is able to provide to the military regime in Mali, save for regime protection alone, because even Russia has been looking for arms in North Korea and Iran. And this is a country that all of them actually depend upon. So like a series of sidesteps, forced and unforced error has actually brought us to where we are now. And then the last, which I think I also need to mention, is the fact that they then decouple from the ECOWAS establishment, which constitute the immediate neighbor that ordinarily should be the first response in terms of counter-terrorism operation that they have been embarking upon. So I think when you put together this series of issues, coupled with the failure of governance that has compounded over the years, I think it brought Mali to where it is now.
Uf, the same question, would you add anything to that? Quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We've seen a lot of foreign intervention, like the French were there, then this huge, peacekeeping force, United Nations, more than, I think, 40,000 people. Then the Russians came. Yeah, the Russians were extremely brutal. They made the conflict worse. But essentially, it's a failure of the Malian state. After 2013, when the French, pushed back the very same, fighters we see now. I mean, Tuareg, they were jihadists. Initially, they were joined by Tuaregs as well. But when they pushed back the jihadists, the idea was then that the French are there to, give a bit of counter-terrorism assistance. The United Peacekeeping Force helps to stabilize things, and then the Malian state comes back. But the Malian state never returned. It's Mali, like many other former French colonies, adopted this French centralized state where all the power and budget is concentrated in the Bamako, like 1,000 kilometers to the south from the northern battlefield. So yeah, there was never much of a state presence in the north, and so the French failed, the Russians failed as well, and whoever comes next to pick up the pieces will also fail unless the Malian government establish a presence, offers services to citizens outside the capital, so they don't fall prey to all these people we see as fighters.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick there, and unpack, I should say. Kabir, what are you hearing from within the country at the moment? I mean, there's a lot of noise, I suppose, and claim and counterclaim.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficulty of allowing a situation to degenerate to this extent. The propaganda being played out by both sides is making it difficult, for instance, to even sieve out and get a sense of where all the circumstances are. About 4 military bases are being contested. On the one hand, between the FLA and JNIM, they claim control of those 4 bases in Amshaj, Tessalit, Aguelhok, and Kidal. And then 2 military airports within central Mali are also being contested. Actually, footage from either JNIM or FLA have shown that they are either in dominance or they're in control of those airports. Apart from that, of course, the appearance of the head of the military junta has also indicated some semblance of governance stability, although his choice of visiting the Russian ambassador also kind of reiterates the relevance of the relationship between Russia and the junta, as it were, at the moment. But then the death of the defense chief, who principally was the one who engineered the involvement of Russia, has also put a question mark. Likewise, the treaty, the agreement between FLA and the Russian the forces that allowed them to exit those contested bases has also indicated perhaps that on the one hand, FLA has acquired weaponry that it could use against the junta, as well as, of course, JNIM. So there is a lot at the moment. But then let's not forget that a few days ago, supplies were brought into Bamako with the help of the Russian, protection. And of course, Niger has also claimed that it is carrying out some airstrikes and some looking. So all of these are playing out at the moment. But what I think remains significantly is the threat that Bamako, and especially the capital Bamako, is under at the moment, and that the junta has not showed enough capability, not just to protect, but to also, as it were, push out the JNIM forces, as well as that of FLA.
Gentlemen, hold those ideas. We're just going to have a look at the protagonists here, look at the fighters who've launched this joint offensive. It's an al-Qaeda-linked armed group called JNIM. It's one of the many operating in countries across the Sahel. It joined forces with Tuareg rebels, members of the Azawad Liberation Front. They are separatists who want to establish an independent homeland in northern Mali. Last weekend, in a series of coordinated attacks, they took control of the towns of Tessalit, Tessit and Kidal, forcing Russian paramilitaries to withdraw. The fighters say they will push towards Gao, Menaka and the historic city of Timbuktu. They've already imposed a siege on the capital, Bamako, and killed the defense minister, Sadio Kamara, in the nearby town of Kati. Looking at this, Ulf, these two broad umbrella organizations, as it were, the FLA and the JNIM, have very different war aims here. What are they?
Yeah, I mean, the jihadists, they want, obviously, like Islamic Sharia, and the Tuareg rebels, basically, they want to control the north, to be left on their own, control, smuggle, trade routes. So it's a tactical alliance. It will easily unravel. What's interesting to note as well is, the Tuaregs, they always claim they have nothing to do with jihadists, and that's often they made their case in Europe with France, we're the good guys, you need to support us. But you can there's a lot of, overlap in personnel, like the head of JNIM, the Al-Qaeda-linked jihadist faction is Iyad Rali. He's a Tuareg, he's a Malian Tuareg, and there are many. They're different, but they also, have many things in common. Like the jihadists, they also, they also include a lot of people who are involved in smuggling. They're basically criminals, kidnappers. So it's they're different, but at the same time, they have lots of things in common. And there's obviously some kind of exchange, if not of personnel, then at least they coordinate activities to maximize the impact.
Oluwole, same question really, but why the common enemy is the government, it's the junta, correct? Is it as simple as my enemy's enemy is my friend, or is it more complicated than even that?
Yes, I think even though they have a fundamental political objective, particularly the separatist group, the fact that the military authoritarian in Mali pull out of the Ojewale Accord, I think it has created a setback for their own aspiration to have their nation carved out of Mali. And now that they also find a convergence in JNIM, they realize that perhaps if they can collaborate, particularly at a time that the country is not playing due emphasis on the cross-border cooperation that they needed, I think they capitalize on that and probably want to teach them a lesson. And the fact remains that I think what is playing out now is evident in the reality that we're seeing, that why it appears that Mali is falling, as most people will argue. I think what is playing out is that they realize that the last bastion, the last stronghold that the regime is holding on to is Bamako. And since September last year, in which we saw the siege and the choke point that they've created for the regime, I think it's about just to pull down a common enemy that they've seen in the States.
Kabir, What's your take on this? Because also, what's interesting is who's funding JNIM and the FLA here? There's a lot of chatter out there. Various parties have been named. There's a lot of chatter about France, but what evidence is there?
Frankly, no verifiable evidence. Like you did say, there are chatter out there. But what is also evident is that these groups have adapted. In the case of FLA, and that's why possibly I differ a little bit with my two discussants. FLA is essentially a self-determination group. They want to establish a country, as it were, allied around their ethnicity. And then, of course, recently we've seen more political statements. We've seen them projecting themselves as a more tolerant and capable political group, as against JNIM, that is clearly, a Sharia-based movement with the atrocities it's conducted in the past. But just like one of the discussants mentioned, there is some commonality in terms of their identity. Now, their weapon capabilities have been acquired mainly through when they overrun military bases, control of routes, and then, of course, their relationship with artisanal mining activities, as well as other illicit activities where they're able to generate funding for the activities that they conduct. Let's not also forget, in the case of JNIM, it is allied to the greater Al-Qaeda group, so some funding may be coming from that greater group. But in terms of verifiable evidence that ties any particular country to supporting them or funding them, nothing has emerged till date to indicate that, besides the charter that exists significantly.
Ulf, what is the Russian role in all this? I mean, how wedded are they to the Goita government? And can Russia really afford to support this country when its resources are being drained by the Ukraine conflict?
Yeah, I mean, they made this stake to their claim that they will protect Mali. And, they claimed when they first arrived in 21 that they would never abandon their allies. And so they're kind of committed. They didn't rescue Syrian dictator Assad, and now they don't look very good withdrawing from the north. So they have to do something, at least try to defend the regime, defend the capital. But it's increasingly clear that Russia really, plays a negative role. I mean, were the ones who kind of convinced the Mali military government to send the United Nations peacekeeping force home, claiming they could, with Russia they would be safe. But the peacekeeping force somehow kept the process alive, some kind of peace it wasn't really moving much, but kept the opponents apart. And then, with the encouragement from the Russians, the military government, declared war on everybody, on the jihadists, on the FLA, the Tuaregs, and now we see the mess. So that is, Russia will probably try to defend Bamako now, but, the North might slip out of control.
Yes, it does look like the report card, as far as the Russians go with their peacekeeping rule, doesn't really come in very, very with top marks, certainly, to put it mildly. But could this junta bring in new foreign backers? There have been other people interested in what Mali has to offer, and we're looking for countries like Turkey or Turkey who want to expand their role in that part of the world.
Yes, going forward, there would have to be a change in strategy. The current strategy is not working. We've mentioned this, and I think there's an agreement among the discussants. And so the junta would have to either reflect or change strategy to, exert governance, as well as to reduce the influence of these two groups. And the most likely direction it would take would be countries, for instance, that are more open, more amenable. And let's not completely remove some Western influence, especially that of the United States, that has shown more interest in the Sahel of recent. And then, of course, the possibility of even countries like the EU member states. A lot of embassies have shut down from Bamako. And that also is an indication, of course, of the weakness that exists and the possibility of what we may see in the coming days. But what is very clear is that the current strategy is not working, and so we may see some changes. AES, it's still kind of at the early stages. It's not yet strong militarily to be able to withstand these two forces that are currently trying to either create a new state or take over Bamako. I think one very significant point is the inability of the junta to exert influence within the population. The recruitment strategy by JNIM and to an extent by FLA is actually relying on that evidence and instances of persecution, sometimes heavy-handedness by the junta and its military operatives, has been used by both JNIM as well as FLA sometimes in recruitment. But the ethnic composition too is absolutely important. And I think one of the things going forward is how well would the junta, for instance, be able to prevent recruitment by this group by addressing some of these root causes that have allowed for the emergence of these groups.
Oluwole, the other countries, neighbouring countries in the Sahel, must be looking at all this with a huge degree of nervousness. There's some evidence of armed groups already infiltrating there. What are the concerns, and will they be able to step in and perhaps stabilise Mali?
Yes, I think it's getting to that point. But, the principle and the protocol of non-interference implies that they need to look at a workable diplomatic solution that is going to bring both parties on the table. ECOWAS extended the olive branch to the military government in the three countries, but on a final note, they decided to pull out. Now, it's a very big concern in the sense that the attacks are already percolating into northern Benin, northern Togo. And I think last year, JNIM had their first lone attack in north-central Nigeria, where they killed a soldier. These demonstrate the expansionist agenda of the terrorist groups. And at this critical point now, it's very, very important that both parties find a common ground, because what is happening in the Sahel is not going to stay in the Sahel. It's going to percolate into the littoral state if nothing is done. What do I think they need to do now? There is this extensive military capability that is seated in most ECOWAS states now, apart from about three that I think are seriously challenged in terms of internal security contradictions in Nigeria, northern Benin, and northern Togo now. When you talk about Ghana, Ivory Coast, Senegal, where I am, these are countries that are relatively peaceful, and they should be able to mobilize within reasonable time, reasonable period for such counter-terrorism operation. ECOWAS has also put that in motion sometimes last year. But, you can't shave a man's head without the man being present. So the crisis now is that they need to move from these, they need to really drop their ideological guard in terms of a military government, don't want to work with democratic government at this point, because it is really, really percolating into the littoral state of West Africa. They need to do something. They need to work together and move beyond their ideological stance.
I mean, also, this is coming against the backdrop of what is turning into a humanitarian crisis. And as Oluwole was suggesting there, what happens in Mali doesn't stay in Mali. So that's also one of the key reasons why we've got to this state of affairs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a regional problem. And unfortunately, these jihadists or rebels, however you want to call them, they're getting more bolder. No? They're targeting now capitals. First, this fuel blockade last autumn on Bamako, then the sophisticated, airport attack in Niger's capital, which apparently was aided by groups based in Nigeria, and now this full-blown attack. So yeah, it's a humanitarian catastrophe. You see already more than 150,000 Malians fled to Mauritania in the past 2 years, mainly Russian atrocities, but also generally poverty. It's no longer it was never a national problem. It was always a regional problem. It needs really a regional response. I fully agree with the other gentleman. It needs it's time to drop this ideological stuff and really find a solution. I think we're beyond a military solution. I mean, these jihadists, they're so entrenched in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso. I mean, talks will be needed at some stage to find some kind of understanding. Like in Mauritania, I had a similar, jihadist issue, and there were talks were opened, also a military response. At some point, a compromise was found, and I guess at some point, negotiations will happen also in Mali.
When you look at this, Kabir, what are the chances of Mali ultimately here splitting up?
I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say 6 and 7, except if there is a huge change in strategy, which has been recommended. All the indicators suggest and show that Mali at the moment is not capable of withstanding these two forces. And so if it continues along the line that it's going at the moment, then yes, that possibility remains huge. Already, the FLA has exerted significant dominance in some parts of Mali. And of course, JNIM has also effectively put a blockade around Bamako. The strategy, of course, is to put pressure on the junta through citizens.
Yeah.
And of course, it's also looking at opposition parties and civil society organizations to join in that pressure. So if that continues, then the possibility of also some form of emergence of state control by JNIM would be a reality. Let's not forget that the Sahel region at the moment remains the hotspot for terrorism globally.
Oluwole, could Mali become an Islamist state?
Well, I think the handwritings are on the wall. Mali is already a failing state that, save for Bamako, has assumed the state of a failed state. I think what is going to likely play out is the fact that now that the military government has realized that they have lost the hinterland, I think they are likely going to defend Bamako with their last sweat. There is a possibility of a negotiation which some people are talking about. This is a military government. It is very, very unlikely that they are going to negotiate because it's going to project the psychology of military incompetence on them. So I think they will continue to sweat it out while the nation continue to suffer, while the citizens continue to suffer, at least for their own purpose of regime protection. But like Kabir has mentioned, I think they have grossly demonstrated that they lack the capacity to protect that city now, that country now, and they need to act fast and do something through procuring cross-border cooperation and widen their security cooperation beyond the narrow prism of relationship with Russia.
Oluwole, thank you so much. Well, thank you to all our guests here, Oluwole Ojewale, Ulf Lessing, and Kabir Adamu. And thank you for watching as well. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, Rishaad Salamat, and the team right here in Doha. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in a moment. Stay tuned.